That's the main reason why, when I ask myself, why should people consider homeschooling? It is the word change. I want to give you 3 ways that homeschooling has changed the environment that I'm in. The first, homeschooling helps you change the way you view learning. Are there any educators here today? Any teachers? Any? Of course, Mrs. J, yes. Okay, welcome. So, part of what I had to do to be able to help homeschool better is I did my own studying. I tried to learn myself, and I realized in the world of learning today, as I completed a 15-month program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education called the Certificate of Advanced Education Leadership, I learned this one interesting triangle model. Can you all say instructional core? So when we look at the way people learn today, the first thing that changed in me is the way I view learning. And I think for many people who come into homeschooling, the way they view learning also changes. Here's what I learned. There's a professor named Richard Elmore, and he proposed that when we learn today, there's 3 main components. Can everyone say teacher here? Teacher? Teacher. All right. Student? Student. All right. Content. Content. So the interaction between these 3 determines the strength of the instruction and the learning. So the more that the teacher has time with you as a student, the more I give you, the more you ask me questions, the more we're able to engage math or science or reading or whichever, the stronger the interaction, the stronger the instruction and learning. Does that make sense? Okay, so that makes sense, right? But here's what changed me. My professor, her name is Dr. Liz City, she said that today, this is a little bit old as a model. Why? When I was in school, so my father who is here and my mom who are here, my father at a certain point, he was actually in the same school system that I was. He was the dean of one of the most prestigious programs in our blue school. So he has some teaching experience also. And they said he was quite a terror. That's my secret insight that I have about my father when he was in school. So in that generation, when I was in school, that generation also, when they were back in school, teacher knows everything, or should. That's what they study for. Student receives everything. You're my teacher. And if I don't know what you're supposed to be teaching me, I'm gonna have a problem because my grades will be bad, etc., etc. Are you with me so far? Today, the idea of teacher has changed based on Dr. Liz City's proposition because of a 6-letter word that used to be a verb that used to be a noun that is now a verb. Where do you go if you don't have answers to questions? Like my son asked me, Dad, the other day, my eldest, he's like, Dad, why is it that Monday to Friday people all over the world generally work and then Saturday and Sunday they don't? You know what I said to him? I used that 6-letter word. That used to be a noun, that's now a verb. What is that word? Google it. Because of the internet and technology, the teacher does not know everything anymore. And they don't have to. The word teacher, based on her proposition, is now the word facilitator. Can you all say facilitator? Facilitator. So instead of knowing everything and giving it to you, my job is to facilitate the learning, and your job is no longer to just receive it, but I can actually source it. I mean, all of you now, as I'm talking, you can go back to your phones and check with Google, is there really a professor named Richard Elmore? Does he make sense? I mean, it really, talk about the instructional core, is Edrick here just kind of pulling our legs? You can validate everything I say. And in fact, you can do it without touching your phones by saying, Alexa, check. If you don't know Alexa, you might know Siri. If you don't know Siri, you know Friendster. Sino mga Friendster dito? Okay. So, you can get content online, and so the job of a student is now to be a learner. I'm no longer just passively sitting and taking in or doing my homework and assignments. The world is changing. Can everyone say changing? Changing. So the first thing that changed in me and in many homeschoolers that I've seen is the way we view learning. For the moms that choose to homeschool, the pressure in knowing everything and giving it has also changed because their job is to be a what? Facilitator. And my wife will talk more about that a little bit later. So if Joy can't teach math to my older sons, what will she do? She doesn't have to know everything. She facilitates. She connects my sons to programs like Khan Academy, which are free online content providers, right? So, first thing that has changed is the view of learning. When I saw this whole model and I learned this, I learned something fundamental, which I love to share to parents, because many young parents and even older ones will ask, what's the best school for my child? Anywhere in the world, any good parent will want the best school that they can afford or get access to for their children, yes or no? So here's the shift in learning. Because of this world today, where the teachers no longer know everything, and you can get anything online pretty much. The challenge is to find out, is this fake news or not? So the world is changing, and it is now called the learning core. This is what Dr. Liz City proposes. And as a result of this, here's the shift. We need to stop asking what is the best school, and we need to ask ourselves, what is the best way for my children to learn? Does that make sense? The first thing that has changed in me is this mindset. Oh, no, it's not about homeschool or regular school. It's not Montessori, progressive, traditional, big school, small school, Christians. The question should be, what is the best way for them to learn? Because all of these institutions and structures have now been leveled by technology and the online space, generally speaking. So, as we shift, the question is now, so Edric, what is the best learning environment today? How can children learn best? There's another lady, her name is Dr. Deborah Bell, and this is what she said. In the research that has been put together today, there's 8 things. And I just want you to read it with me. I'm not going to go deep. Just read it with me and see if it resonates with you. Number 1, let's read this together. They believe, go ahead, their teacher and fellow students care about them. Number 2, they have opportunities to pursue their interests. Number 3, they can make choices and decisions about their learning. Number 4, they can observe other students who model what success looks like. So you're starting to ask yourself, is this what my child is going through? Number 5, they have a teacher who is available to provide feedback and encouragement. Number 6, all you. Number 7. Okay, finally, the research says the best way children can learn is if they have plenty, go ahead, of physical activity, sunshine, and fresh air. So, here's what she said. Dr. Deborah Bell, in a conference in Brazil 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, this is her slide. She put together researchers from all over, and they gathered it and said, this is the best learning environment. She said this is her synthesis. What does the best learning environment look like today that has changed the way I view learning? Here's what she said. If we could build a school from the ground up, based on what research shows today about how children learn best, what will we be building? Oh. So I want you to look at the person beside you, wherever you're standing right now, and say, your home is the best learning environment. Go. So, first shift. The first thing that's changed is the way we view learning. Could it be, possibly and arguably, that the best way to learn today and into the future is through our homes? First shift. The second change, I'm going to go to my computer here to remember my story. The second change is all about relationships in the family. So if I didn't homeschool, the kind of relationships I have with my 6 kids, I don't know if you know that we have 6 kids. I woke up the other day, I'm like, baby, what happened? We're like rabbits. And the relationship I have with my wife are fundamentally different because of homeschooling. Let me give you a specific story. I'm not very proud of sharing this, but my wife shares it, so I'll share it anyways. There was this talk we were asked to give on parenting in Baguio. So we packed our kids, we're all in the car. They're singing songs, we're enjoying ourselves. We're driving up to Baguio for this talk on what? Parenting, right? How to be a good parent to your kids. And as we were driving up to Baguio, I was driving, right? Oh, we had a driver, yeah. So we were driving. I was preparing. I was like madly preparing. Like, okay, gotta get my stuff together. And then the kids start making noise. So those of you that have young kids, you know, they kind of make noise in the car, and it's a contained environment for hours. And then suddenly, someone farted. In Filipino, may ubutot. One of my kids passed gas, and I have very strong olfactories. I'm very sensitive to smell. Maybe it's a genetic thing from my parents. So I was like, who farted? It destroyed my train of thought. I'm like, who farted? And my kids were like, and then my youngest daughter raised her hand. I farted, Daddy. So my youngest at that time, we only had 5 then. And then I said, okay kids, from now on, no farting. Ever in the car. Sounds just irrational, right? Sounds irrational. It's like, no farting. They're like, I said, quiet, because Daddy has to finish this talk. And the whole car ride was quiet, all the way up to Baguio. Checked in the hotel, quiet. We were about to give the talk on what? Parenting. So my wife is not talking to me, and you know when your wife is not talking to you, when she normally does, there's a problem. So she's like this. She's stewing. I know what she's thinking. She's thinking, you know, I can't believe he's doing this in the car ride before we give a parenting talk. And all the kids are now just, you know, uncomfortably quiet, and they're probably traumatized because my husband is so irrational about farting. And so she's thinking all these, I know they're thinking these things. And we're about to speak. It's like 15 minutes before I got my computer. We're now in the table beside the room where we're speaking, and the kids are gathered. They're eating their food. And as I'm about to go up, I realize, you know what? It's gonna be such great hypocrisy if I get up there, talk about parenting, and my wife sees what kind of a father I was in the car right before that, and my kids all see that. What kind of credibility will I have? What did I say? Homeschooling changes the way we relate to each other as a family. Why? Our kids see everything we do. So because they saw that, and I was gonna do that, and they're homeschooling, if they were in school, I would have given a talk and they wouldn't have been with us, but they're all with us. So I realized, Daddy has to change. So I went to my kids as they were eating. I looked at them in the eyes. I looked at my wife, and I said, children, honey, will you forgive me for being unreasonable, for being irrational, especially before a talk on parenting? And you know, after that statement, this is very hard for me to humble myself like that, but this is one of the parenting things we learn. This is one of the things we learn about as you homeschool. You need to learn to ask your children how to improve. So I did that. I'm like, I'm sorry, we forgive Daddy. And when I said those words, I looked at my wife. It's like the ice melted. My kids started to smile. They're like, of course, Daddy, we forgive you. And then they hugged me, and then I had them eat, and I looked at my wife. My wife's like, I'll never forgive you. No, I'm just kidding. She said, of course I forgive you, honey. She gave me a hug, and then I went in, and with greater credibility, I gave the talk on parenting, and my wife was finally talking to me. Why do I share that silly story of what happens in our home? Homeschooling changes the way we relate to each other as a family. You're forced to be on your toes and learn to apologize because there is no exit. You have to learn to deal with each other on a going basis. Are you following me? The final change, which I'm going to share, and then I'm going to ask my wife to share about her viewpoint on why you should homeschool, is me. There's something about choosing to homeschool that if I did not do it, I would not be the man I am today. It does something in you, even as a dad, as a husband, as a person with all your dreams, ambitions, and goals. Very recently, my son, Eden, was with me and a number of dads. One of the dads was not here. I had a good friend who passed by. He wasn't part of that group. We went to Taiwan on what's called a rite of passage. So he just turned 13, and we want to make sure our sons who are 13 understand that the teenage years are not about recklessly figuring out their life. It's about stepping up and becoming a young man. So we brought them to Taiwan. We were going to climb the second highest mountain called the Joy Mountain, which is not very joyful as you climb it. So we prepped. We took him up. We went through that because we homeschool. We could do these things, you know. So as we did that, we went to this park after the whole experience. This place was called the Yulin Park or something like that, which is basically an island strip in between these waves. And the waves have helped form the rock formations. So when we got there, it was clear, and we went to the rock formations. And as we were going to the rock formations, you know, I have ADHD, like adult ADHD. I can't really keep still, and I like to go places, and my other fellow dad was the same way. So me and him, we just went through the park and left our sons with the other dad who we're with, right? Or we assumed they would be with the other dad. So I'm going around like, oh, cool, taking pictures, going on. The other dad's going off there, and then it starts to pour. And as the rain starts to pour, I'm running, going to this shelter, and I see this monument, and this monument is of this fisherman, this big bronze statue of a fisherman, and on the plaque, as I was reading it, it was in the 1960s, a fisherman saved a young boy who was drowning in that park because of the waves. But as he saved the boy, he actually was unsuccessful, and they both died. So that was my last thought as I was running into the shelter while it was raining. I'm running to the shelter, and I'm like, oh wait, where's my son, Eden? I'm at the shelter, and guess who's at the shelter already drinking coffee comfortably? The other ADHD dad. So I'm like, where's your son? He's like, oh, I don't know. I think they're with our friends. So I'm like, no signal because I'm in a foreign country and I'm very kuripot. I did not get, the SIM card there. Let me cut the story short. Our last dad friend comes in with the son of my friend and his son, but no Eden. So I'm like, hey guys, where's Eden? Because he was hanging out with those young men. They were all taking pictures, having fun. And they're like, oh, we were with him. We were taking pictures before the rain. But as we were finishing our pictures, he said he wanted to go back to you. But he did not know where you were. So he went back on the trail in the rock formations. Because that's where I last was. So as a father, what do you think I was thinking? I was like, where is my son? So I put on my jacket in the pouring rain and I just went beeline. I said, where's Eden? So I said, guys, to stay here, I'm gonna find my son. So I went and they're like, do you want us to comb the whole island? I'm like, no, let me just take care of this because if we all get lost, it's gonna be crazier. So just stay here, I'll go look for my son. So I look for my son, and as I'm looking for him, if you know me, I'm praying. I'm like, dear God, please do not let my story be like that fisherman. I do not want to lose my son here. What will I tell my wife? Honey, you know what? We went on a rite of passage, and part of the passage is he's now in heaven. I didn't want to have to say that. I lost my son, and he died. I was really thinking about those things. I went to the rock formation, and only the few park rangers who were there with their hoods, and the waters were coming up. They spoke Mandarin, so I'm like, boy. They're like, no, boy. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh, I said, dear God, I'm sorry. And this is the third change. I told you, homeschooling does something in you. I'm thinking to myself, what a reckless father. I mean, I assumed that the other dad would take care of them, but this is my son. I should have been watching him more closely. And as I was thinking about that, I also said to myself, I can't believe he just left the pack. I mean, why didn't he stay with them? So a part of me was like, bad dad, and a part of me was like, bad son. And I was tossing between those two as I'm walking in the rain and I'm looking for him. I finally walked through that rock formation. And since I had backtracked, I went on this single path and I was praying. I said, God, wouldn't it be great if I could just have like mental telepathy with my son and he could just speak to me, Daddy, I'm here. And I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna look for you. I wish we could have that kind of connection, right? I said, would you just give me something, please? I am sorry. I will be a better father. I will be more attentive and not just let my ADHD kick in. Forgive me. So I'm walking and you know what? The craziest thing happened. I heard this loudspeaker go off. And then, Daddy, this is Eden. I'm in the Visitor Information Center. If you hear this, can you please find me? And his voice was trembling. So, from bad dad and bad son, I removed the bad son and I said bad dad and I just kept walking and I'm like, okay. I know Eden is a wreck right now. I know he's really trying to be cool, but he's terrified because he's in a foreign country. People don't speak his language. He was left by the only group of people. And as a bad dad, I didn't even tell him, let's have a protocol. In case you get lost, let's meet here. So he just worked with his own instinct, right? He went to that visitor information center. And I'm thinking in my head, as I see my son, what will be the first words that come out of my mouth? Because this will be a moment. He is lost. He is hoping that his father finds him, doesn't know how else to reach us, and this is the change in me. I said, okay, instead of my instinct is to lecture my kids and say, you should have done this, you should have done. I realized I was the bad dad, so I said, okay, I am just going to embrace my son and tell him it's okay, Daddy's here, I found you, I love you, and I will make sure that I do not leave you again. It was my fault. Instead of thinking about the things that, why did you leave the pack? Why did you stay with your friends? So I saw him there. I went to the visitor center, and as I went to the visitor center, he was there. His back was turned, and he turned around, and he was trying to be tough, right? Because he's a young man. We did this rite of passage. He starts to cry, and I hug him. And I said, it's okay, Eden. Daddy's here. I found you. I love you. I am sorry that I wasn't looking after you closely, and I will look after you better. And he just started sobbing in my arms. He's like, Dad, I'm sorry. And I said, it's okay. It's Daddy's fault. And that moment reminded me that as a father, we cannot keep our guards down. homeschooling changes us. So 3 things that I shared. Why should you consider homeschooling? There's something about this frequent contact with your children and the intentionality that as you go through the experience, it changes the way you view learning. It changes the way you interact as a family, and I shared a silly story of ours, and it changes something in you. So there is a mom who I got to interview in one of my Harvard program researches, and she said these lines, and this is my summary of it all. Why I've enjoyed the experience of homeschooling. It's because of this. Homeschooling, I am not the same person as a result of it. It hasn't been a perfect journey. There are some frustrations and struggles, but when I look back, I would do it all over again. Maybe ask my parents to homeschool me too.